So we can try to keep our attention to the breath for a few moments. So as as we have been discussing for a long time, the reason why we have problems in our everyday life is because of our own delusion, defilements, and the more stronger defilement, delusion we have, the more problem we have, the more unhappy we are. The less we have, the more peaceful we are, more less problem we have. And so in order to, so therefore the purpose of practicing the Dharma is to reduce those defilements and eventually overcome all those defilements, the delusions, And in order to overcome them, then we need to understand how those each of those defilements and how it affects us, and what are the functioning of that, and how it arises, and so forth. And for that, I think Lama Tsongkhapa explained, especially last week, about 10 different delusions he spoke about, we went through. And again, if we want to study more, then, in mind and mental factors and Abhidhamma Koshas, others, 6 root delusions, 20 secondary delusions that arises from those. And so understanding them help us to recognize and identify when any of those defilement, those delusion arises, to be able to recognize and identify, this particular delusion or defilements arising now, and also recognizing how it arises and how it affects us on physical level, on emotional level. Maybe in those subtle delusions, maybe it is hard to recognize on physical level how it affects, but when it's gross and is easy to understand, feel sensation, even on bodily level, you can understand that. And then Lama Tsongkhapa explained those 10 delusions, and we just started where he also, how does those delusion arises, and as by quoting one quotation by one of great Indian master, Dharmakirti, where it said, first we have sense of, self. On the basis of that, then there's sense of self, others. So not only there's a sense of, when we think about ourselves, not only there's sense of self, but there is appearance of independent self. It's not just appearance of self. There is appearance of independent self. And even there is the appearance, but if you don't kind of believe or grasp that way, it wouldn't be a big problem. If we know that appearance is Even though there is appearance of independent I or self, but that appearance is mistaken. If we know it is a mistaken, if we don't believe that, that wouldn't be a big problem. But for us, there's first that appearance of independent self, and then on the basis of that, then there's next level that's grasp or apprehend independent self or I on the basis of that as it appears, and that, so that become a big problem. And on the basis of that independent I, then there is also not only sense of others, but there is sense of independent others. On the basis of that, then we get attached to the self, oneself, or our side, and we have angers towards others and other side. And so attachment and anger arises. On the basis of attachment and anger, then many other delusions arises. And then, that brings problem, you know. Due to that, then due to such as attachments and anger, then our mind is not happy, not settled. Our mind is disturbed, agitated, and due to that, our mind is not happy. And then when we are not happy, then of course, then we are in problem. And when we are unhappy, when in that problems, then we create more problem for others. Okay, and so I think we just kind of I think did you go the away? Did you finish the? I guess we 108. Yeah.
Well, there was one, the little paragraph. No, it's that Dharmakirti quote that you're talking about.
Yeah.
At the bottom, the very bottom.
Okay, I think it's a commentary on the computing the value cognition, which I just mentioned. When there is a self, first there is a sense of awareness of self, and then there is awareness of others on the basis of that. And on the basis of that, dividing between them, you know, self and others, brings grasping to the self and anger to the others, and closely connected with these two. Closely connected with these two, the grasping, attachment, and anger, then all other faults come into being. Then all other delusions and defilements arises. Jealousy, you know, greediness, resentful, and all of that, all other delusion arises. And through those all the delusion, then you know, we engage in unhealthy, unwholesome actions. And due to those unhealthy and unwholesome actions, then we create cause and condition for our own destruction, our own pain, and our own sufferings, as well as for the suffering and pain of others as well. And so that's where all the faults come from, you know, that fundamental ignorance. So then in order to overcome the delusion, then we have to have some understanding of how those delusions destroy and harms and destruct oneself and others. So the more better understanding you have of the faults and defect and disadvantage of that, the more you will be have a strong inspiration to overcome them, and therefore the disadvantage of mental afflictions. Third, in the ornament to the Mahayana Sutra in Materials, that it says the mental afflictions destroy you, you know, destroy other sentient beings, destroy your ethics. So it's clear when we have anger, it's very clear, we have talked about many times how it destroy you, you know, and then how it destroy others. And same with, you know, attachments. Even though when we have anger, the anger sometimes it present, the anger present as though is protecting us, sense of protecting us, giving us sense of kind of courage and confidence. But it is false courage and false sense of confidence. Because when we're in a state of anger and hatred and so forth, you become most vulnerable. Because you lose your mind, your ability to reason and think properly, and so therefore, in the end, it always brings more distractions to yourself. So that sense of the anger give us sense of that is false sense of protection, is false sense of courage, is false sense of courage, and on the other hand, when the attachment arises, that attachment is present as though is kind of taking care of us, bring closer, it kind of again but it is the attachments, that lead to the most time the anger, and hatred, and it is the attachment that we are always unhappy and dissatisfied. So in that way, it destroys our mental peace. It destroys our virtuous mind. And it also destroys others, due to attachments. Then whenever we feel, there is some kind of, whenever we feel someone's competing towards the object of our attachment, we started to feel bad about that people, because you feel they are your competitors for your object of your attachment, whatever you're trying to get it. And slowly, that leads to anger, hatred, and then with that anger and hatred, then we engage in certain actions, harmful thoughts, speech, and actions, and that also bring pain, suffering to others and destroy others, sentient beings, and destroy your ethics, all the ethic, even though we all want to have to live our life more ethical, more moral, but it's hard to live that, even though we have the wish to live that, and we make effort to live more ethical life, more moral life. When we even though we try, still it is hard, because the delusions, afflictive emotion, delusion arises, and when you are overwhelmed, overpowered by those delusions, then we become more unethical, more immoral. It's due to those afflictive emotions. And once there is deep base, what is deep base means? Deep base. So here is referring to your ethic, when your ethic is deteriorating, your ethic or your moral deteriorate, then you become inferior in gain, and then people lose trust in you, confidence in you, and because of that, then the guidance and teachers reveal, what is it, revile? Well, at least Okay, and there will be nasty dispute, and you will, and you know, if we really think all the dispute we have on country to countries, on family to families, on individual level, all of them, the dispute, the argument, all this conflict comes due to one of the delusions. One of the delusions. Sometimes because of ignorance, sometimes anger, sometimes attachment, greediness, you know. It's so painful to see, you know, family fighting over the will, over the inherence, you know. You see that's so common nowadays, so common among families. When someone died, passed away, then those left behind started to fight between them. You know, it's becoming more and more, and it's because of again attachment, greediness. You know, and due to all that kind of unwholesome actions, as a result, you will take rebirth elsewhere in the unfree state, unfortunate state in the futures. And through debasement of what you have attained or not attain, not attain, that you have, there is great mental suffering. I don't know what is, I have to check the Tibetan. Mm. So we experience a lot of mental sufferings because of not getting, which we have not achieved, which we want to achieve, but we have not achieved. So not being able to achieve because of attachment to that, you know. Also, there's which we have already accomplished and achieved because of strong attachment. We are still not satisfied and content. Still, we want better and more, and still we are mentally suffering, you know. So for everything that we accomplished, everything we have achieved, still we are not happy and satisfied because of our delusion, attachments. We still, because we want better and more. And those who have not accomplished, not achieved, of course we are unhappy because we want to accomplish something, we want to obtain something, we want to gain something, but we are unable to gain it, and because we are very attached to it, and so therefore that all great mental suffering arises. And also engaging the Bodhisattva's behavior, the Bodhisattva way of life, he says, any means such as hatred and craving do not have arms, physical arms, legs, and so on, and they do not have valors. What is valors? Valor. Either. So why is it that they have reduced me to the servitude? You know. So it's saying basically, even though it doesn't have physical arm and all of that, but somehow, you know, we have been slave of them. It has, the delusions have become our master and boss, and we have become their slave. And because of being that slave, you know, then that is where you have no real freedom, you know. You have no real freedom. You know, you are in prison of their delusions. And as long as we are slave and prison of the delusions, we can never have true inner peace, happiness, and joy. Hmm? While abiding my mind, such defilements or delusions, they happily inflict harm on me. The patient that does not get angry at them is unsuitable, blameworthy patient. So there he is saying, being okay with for our delusions to remain in our heart and become the boss and master and ourselves become a slave, and just being okay is not, he's saying being patient and being okay with it is unworthy or is not the right way. Instead, we should try to confront. We should try to confront that's delusions, that's defilements, by understanding the harm that it does to oneself and others. Mhm. Being patient means not confronting in here, not confronting them. Instead of not confronting, you should try to confront them. Um, Even the gods and demigods and were all to rise as enemies and against me, they could not lead and put me in the fire of without respect. So here is saying, you know, the internal enemy, of defilements, delusions, such as anger, is the worst enemy. Is the worst enemy. It's much more worse than the external enemy. Even the whole world become your enemy, and even the whole human beings, sentient beings, rise against you, try to hurt you, try to harm you. If you are able to keep your mind patience practice, they will not be able to lead you to the lower rebirth, such as lower rebirth. No matter what, they cannot lead you to lower rebirth if you are able to keep your mind undisturbed. But on the other hand, the internal enemy of delusion, when they arise in yourself, then your mind is disturbed. Your mind is disturbed, agitated. Through that, then our delusion arises, such as anger. And through that disturbing minds, then we create a negative karma that lead us to the lower rebirth. And even in this lifetime, we can see if someone has developed high realizations, everyone can try to turn against them, criticize them, talk bad about them, um, insult them, humiliate them, whatever others try to do, but they can still keep their mind calm, peaceful, unaffected by that, if they don't have the delusions and if they have strong practice. On the other hand, if you don't have big practice and if you have strong delusions, even no one is bothering you, you will still be disturbed. Even everyone is trying to be nice and kind to you, still will interpret it as something as negative because of our delusions. Even someone's act of compassion, you see it as not as an act of compassion. You see them act of maybe some kind of hypocrisy, some kind of trying to take advantage of you, all of that. As long as we have those delusions, and that can disturb our mind. Mm. The mental afflictions, those powerful foes, so those mental afflictions are the main enemy and most powerful enemy. They throw me into it in one instant, meaning to such a low rebirth, where nothing met with, not even the Mount Meru is left behind, not even the ashes, you know. So it is talking about some of the fires of in the lower rebirth, where it is so powerful that it can burn even the Mount Meru in an instant like that, even the most strongest. And so when you have strong delusions, and out of that strong delusion we engage in a strong negative karma, and in instant that we can be burned in that kind of state where the power of that. So such is the afflicted emotions power compared to my foes, compared to our external enemies. Okay, the mental afflictions producted was product pro prostrated protract without beginning nor end. Not all of my other enemies would be able to last so long. So basically it is saying, you know, our external enemy, no matter how bad they are, you know, they have never been our enemy all the time. In the past, from many lifetimes, they have been our kind fathers, mothers, kind child, kind grandparents, and so on. Many times, you know, they have never been always enemy. Sometimes they were our friends. Sometimes they were um, uh, kind relative and all of that. Sometimes they have helped us, protected us. Sometimes they have sacrificed their happiness, all of that. Even though maybe we might have some conflict in this life, difficulty in this life. But whereas the internal enemy of the afflicted emotion, delusions, they have been harmful from the beginningless time until now. Never been helpful, beneficial, always harmful, always hurtful, harmful, you know. Even in this lifetime, you know, so-called our enemy, it changes. We have conflict with someone at a certain time, we dislike them certain time, and then, you know, over the time we get over it, and they don't bother us anymore, you know. And even before that, they didn't bother us. So there was a certain period that bothered us and that we had a conflict. But it doesn't last from the beginning. They were not our enemy when we were born. Okay? Probably they won't be whole through our life until we die, you know. But that afflicted emotions, they were hurtful, harmful, destructive from the very beginning of our birth until we die, through our whole life. And that is how destructive they are. So comparatively, the external enemies, the harm they do to us is very small, external enemy, compared to the harm done by the internal enemy in terms of the delusions. While everyone's help you and make you happy when you act in accord and with the reverence, if you attend to the mental afflictions, they inflict suffering and harm in return. And so here's on external enemy, you know, we get conflict because we have different opinion and different argument. We don't agree with things, you know. But if you try to agree to them, if you try to be nice to them, if you try to not disagree with them, if you try to agree with them, if you try to follow their views and be respectful and so on, they can be a kind and nice, you know, from not being so nice to being nice, from being not from being disliking to you to liking you. It is possible, which is not possible. It has happened many times in our life. But this internal enemy, no matter how you try to agree with it, no matter how you try to obey it, no matter how you try to respect it, it always, only thing that it does is harm. That's the only thing it does. It can never become kind of something which helps you, benefits you. It's always harmful. Unlike like external enemy, if you change your behavior, your action, they can change from enemy to friends, and they can become from acting harmful way to helpful way. But these delusions, it can never be, no matter how much you try to give yourself, always harmful. And with that, what we have to understand is this internal enemy of afflictive emotions is much more worse than the external enemy. We, at the moment, our really, maybe we might have a little bit of intellectual understanding, but we don't really have experiential understanding of that, because the way we respond, you know, in terms of external enemy, we get so occupied with them, thinking about them, what they did, and all of that, and how to kind of get back to them, and all of that. But when the delusion arises, we don't give much attention to that. To confront them, how to confront them, and trying to confront them, because we have not really understood how harmful they are and how they are the true enemy, you know. And so through that kind of reflection, contemplation with our own, then the more and more you understand how harmful they are, the more and more you understand they are the true enemy, the more you will try to confront them, the more you will try to apply antidote to overcome them, the more you will try to make sure that they do not arise. And if they do arise, immediately trying to apply whatever antidote and trying to confront them. So you should reflect on this advantage stated like here. And then Kadamba Geshe Gombowa said, in order to abandon the mental afflictions, it is necessary to know their disadvantage, you know, the faults of those mental afflictions and their definitions, you know, what are each of those mental afflictions, what are the characteristic of those mental afflictions, and their antidote, what are the antidote to overcome those mental afflictions, and the cause for their arising. Then how does the afflictive emotion arises? What are the cause? Because if you recognize all of that, you know, then before afflictive emotion arises, when the cause are coming together, you can stop the cause before delusion arises. You know, it's like, you know, in a very dry weather, you know, and if you see some fire, because you know there is danger that could lead to a big fire, you will try to extinguish them as quick as possible when it is very small, because you know that could lead to that big fire. Same way, you know, there are certain cause and conditions, external, internal cause and conditions that give rise to those delusions, afflictive emotions. If you can recognize that at the very beginning stages, it's easy to take care of them. Once delusion arises and is intense, then it is much more difficult. And so, understanding that helps. Once you have understood this advantage, you should see them as false, full of faults, and how it harms, hurts oneself and others, long-term, short-term, long-term, and apprehend them as enemy. They see them as the true enemy, and the real enemy. If you do not understand their disadvantage, you will not understand them to be your enemies. And if you don't understand them as enemies, you will not try to overcome and confront them. Therefore, you should consider them along the line of statements found from the, we see already the two of that from the ornament of Mahayana Sutra, engaging in both set of behaviors. So we try to use that as tools, vehicles to reflect and contemplate on them, and to see that. And in order to know the definition of mental affliction, you should also study Abhidharma. There are two Abhidharma, one by Vasubandhu, one by Asanka, the higher Abhidharma. At least explanation of 5 aggregates. Once you have become acquainted with the root and secondary afflictions, so there are 6 root delusions or afflictive emotions and 20 secondary afflictions. You will identify, then you will be able to identify, when attachment arises in yourself, you identify, oh, this is attachment. When anger arises, you identify and recognize, oh, this is anger. And when jealousy arises, you identify and recognize, oh, this is jealousy. When greediness arises, you identify and recognize this is greediness with each of those afflictions, so forth. Whatever it is, as soon as they arise in your continuum, thinking this is that, oh no, it has arisen, and then you will fight the mental afflictions, and then you will be able to confront by applying whatever technique, meditation, antidote that you have learned, Sometimes even just by, if you don't have a very strong practice of, mindfulness, the practice of, the analytical meditation and so forth, sometimes even just kind of reciting some mantras even can help us. Sometimes even just kind of, you recognize I'm angry, anger arises, and then you know that your mind is disturbed and that could explode anytime, and immediately trying to just go to the nature, just kind of get some fresh air, by water, by the mountains, somewhere, that sometimes that even that help, So when you identify, when you recognize it, then you can take those different actions to reduce, overcome them. If you don't identify, your anger arises, but you don't know what is happening. Something's not right, something disturbing, but you don't know what actually happened. So it is hard to then find the right antidotes to overcome it. It's like you are not feeling well, but you don't know what in a physical level, you don't know what you are not feeling. If you know you are not feeling particular, then you can take whatever medication for that particular, same thing. Then we can apply the antidotes. This kind of understanding is necessary. And then next, due to those afflictive emotions, how does the karma or actions is created? The second has 2 points: identifying the karma that has been accumulated and how it is accumulated. First, the karma is intentions, the mental factor that makes its concomitant mind move and urge it towards objects is a mental karma. So it's among the 51 mental factors, one of the mental factors is intentions, and it is that intention that drives your primary mind towards certain objects. And so it is saying that, so these intentions that drive us to do something, whether in mental level or verbal level or physical level. So that is the